Greetings, Guardians. My name is Bife here. So with the death of 3, the member of the 9 that's tied to Earth, there was always a chance that we would see repercussions on our home planet itself. Now in the time of Renegades, and honestly since Ash and Iron, we're starting to see more and more dramatic side effects of 3's death. It all brings us to a very simple but grim conclusion. Earth, if you just look at it, is convulsing, changing, and most likely dying. To understand some of this, I think we should look to the recently added exotic mission, Fire and Ice, not to mention the new lore from both Renegades and Ash and Iron. Before we go any further, you should know that we have some spoiler warnings in here for a reason. I'll be discussing stuff from the end of the Renegades campaign, so be warned, switch off now if you don't want to hear about Calamity on Earth and the way people are reacting to it. Speaking of which, we first started seeing signs of the changes a few months ago, and those reports were certainly weird, but none of them had been truly apocalyptic yet. Save for one. Whilst there were reports of gravitational anomalies, random pockets of minerals reacting strangely across Earth, the most pressing report was that of red phosphorus rain. Arnor Mahal was the one to make that survey report, and she described it as if the Earth itself was weeping blood. This blood rain was of course accompanied by crops and flora generally starting to die across all of Earth's surface, as well as an uptick in disease and a decrease in the level of health for all the residents of the tower and the city. Moreover, without any other influence, there are the people who reside on Earth as well. They had started to notice the changes long before Ido and Arnor took it upon themselves to broadcast the truth to the people of the city. And then there's the reality of the situation on the ground at this point in time. Firstly, with the survey work on Earth being as extensive as it is, the Vanguard has been spread thin, and Guardians generally aren't available for official support on any other endeavors. This included our own Renegade operation as well, which of course was not even sanctioned by the Vanguard, but the point still stands. Unsanctioned ops can still be given a nudge of support on the down low, and even that wasn't available. But of course, it gets worse and worse the more we hear about it. In the Heliostat exotic mission, Maya claimed that we were fighting for a dead world, and with the new information from Fire and Ice, I think we can start to see what she means.
We've done our best to control what we can in regards to the transmutations. But we can only do so much. Parts of the Andes are fully copper. The mangroves of Georgia are suffocating on argon. But nowhere is more changed than the Great Lakes. The nature of this war has shifted. The fronts are in our ecologies themselves.
So this all sounds pretty bad, but for context I want to remind people that the Andes is a mountain range that spans the length of Latin America. It's a little bit like saying the Rockies have turned to salt, or the whole of Australia has begun to melt down into liquid mercury. And whilst these reports are bad, they're nothing compared to the shock and awe of the individuals living with these changes day by day. I think the best examples of this come from the lore of the Compact Defender sidearm. It covers a variety of perspectives, including Anna Bray's partner, the Owl Sector operative known as Cameron, a warrior within Keitel's ascendancy caring for an Elixni child, the new leader of the Hidden, Chalco Yong, and last but not least, the Guardians Osiris and Saint 14. Take a listen and remember, these are the changes we can see on Earth after 5 or 6 months. This is just the beginning. Not all of them seem dramatic at first, but some of the anomalous effects in this story have absolutely massive implications. Cameron leaned down in the early dawn to greet the lavender plant resting on her windowsill. "Good morning," she said with familiar cheer. She lifted a cup of water toward the plant, but it began to wither and wilt under the sun's rising form. "Oh. Suddenly not a morning person," Cameron murmured, deep brown eyes filled with concern. An Elixni hatchling chittered in delight, placing a ball in the oversized hands of an Ascendancy warrior. Wind whipped viciously at their clothes, and the sky darkened without warning. He quickly scooped up the hatchling and ran for cover into the hangar before shards of iron started falling from the sky. The hatchling burrowed into his arms with a cry. "Courage, little one," he murmured. "It's only rain." Chalco raised her flute to her lips, but her notes turned sour as she played. She tuned and started anew, but still the notes slid down, until F settled into D-flat and so on. Striking the tines of her tuning fork produced the same discordance. "Should have just learned the tambourine," she grumbled. "This is interesting," Osiris coughed. Saint 14 cupped his ceramic teacup with both hands. "Failsafe's blend. There is zing to it." He grunted as he tried, and failed to release his grip on the teacup. With considerable effort, Osiris pried it from Saint's fingers, then pressed a teaspoon against his own cup. The spoon leaped up and held against the gold rim. "Magnetized," Osiris whispered. "That is not supposed to happen," Saint replied, holding his gaze. So there's a bunch of worrying stuff in here, but I want to break these down individually. Firstly, Cameron's plant dying spontaneously is odd in a vacuum, but is exceedingly concerning when one remembers that this is happening all over Earth, and when you remember that we have to worry about the food supply. Changes like this impacting things so quickly is not going to be good. Finding food might be a problem. I'm sure someone in the comments will be able to extrapolate the consequences of this second note, but I personally have no idea what the implications are for the changing of Chalco Yong's instrument, and for it naturally falling out of tune. For what it's worth, this could be a change in human perception, or perhaps a change in the air itself which is making the instruments sound different. This one baffles me as much as it seems to be baffling Chalco. The two more immediately intense and worrying ones are the story of the Cabal Warrior and Saint and Osiris. On the Cabal Warrior's side, we have a much clearer and more immediate implication of the threat. If it starts raining shards of iron, and we need to find cover from them, then Earth is going to very quickly become uninhabitable. But there are bigger implications because this means that the transmutations are affecting the oceans, and in turn the water cycle, where water is normally evaporated from the oceans and the surface of Earth generally, gathering in the upper atmosphere as clouds and vapor, and then dropping back onto land as rain when there's sufficiently low pressure. If this is being changed, then our water supply is presumably also subject to these terrible changes, and if metals get into the water supply, that can lead to horrifying health consequences very quickly. One also has to consider whether the water supply is at risk generally, and I'd remind you, a person can live without food for a while, but a person can't survive more than a few days without liquids. Saint and Osiris's strange moment is something that doesn't seem as odd as the rest at first, but I think the longer that you contemplate it, the worse it gets. At first, objects being randomly magnetized doesn't seem so bad, but random objects being magnetized implies that there are spontaneous electromagnetic fields appearing in proximity of these objects. That's bad for any number of reasons. Random objects becoming magnetized is one thing, but imagine if this happens in a power grid that is deliberately shielded from any kind of energetic interference. I can't imagine that will end well. We also need to acknowledge that this is just the start of things, and everything is liable to get worse and more dramatic over time. And of course, if you want to go ahead and scale this up, there are even more dramatic consequences for this particular kind of anomaly, because if there is something that is starting to cause random things to magnetize, I would imagine that random bits of Earth, even random large swaths of Earth, like the Andes being magnetized, might then lead to some truly terrifying effects. In particular, I wonder if Earth's EM field is at risk. In fact, if it is going to be destabilized, that could genuinely be the thing that kills us. It's catastrophic to a degree that people haven't really grasped, I don't think. For one, the EM field around Earth is what allows Earth's atmosphere to stay on the planet as opposed to simply bleeding off into space. If it gets disrupted, we'll all slowly choke and starve to death with no air and no water. But before we even think about that, we need to consider that the EM field is a massive defense against solar radiation from the sun and anomalous background radiation from space. Anyone who's watched Chernobyl will understand what happens if you get exposed to sudden spikes of radiation. Anyone who isn't a fan of forest fires will likely also not quite like the sun's rays reaching us unshielded. Earth losing its EM field is an extreme, but if the distortions are bad enough, I don't think it's impossible. Oh, and another thing, the EM field keeping our atmosphere in place is also very important because our atmosphere is what protects us from micrometeorites, which break up on re-entry thanks to our atmosphere's presence. It was never going to stop Chicxulub or anything close to that catastrophic, but it stops it from raining tiny rocks around our head, moving at terminal velocity. So yeah, it doesn't sound like a lot at first, but honestly, the entire situation is moving at an alarming pace and it's already dangerous enough to kill. Given too much time with no solution, all of this could form what could accurately be called an apocalypse. When looking at all of this, I can't help but sit there and think of something that happened in history that also seems maybe not quite analogous, but like something that's worth considering. The Bronze Age collapse. The Bronze Age collapse was essentially a moment where a ton of ancient civilizations all ceased to be around about the same point of time. And the reality is we don't exactly have a bead on the exact causes for all of this. However, there is a theory out there that the Bronze Age collapse wasn't caused by a single thing, but instead was caused by a series of cascading failures across Bronze Age civilizations that led to their downfall. For example, a society can handle a single calamity like a plague or a famine or a war, but it can rarely survive all of them at once. I fear that we may be witnessing just that. Earth's death will not be one determined by a single butcher or a single disaster, but instead by a cascading series of system failures that break the foundations upon which we've built our world. I think Zavala put it best. The war against this calamity is taking place in the very ecologies of Earth itself. But that's all from me for now. Hopefully you enjoyed the video, existential as this topic might be. And if you did, or if you just found the stuff informative, go ahead and leave a like and leave your own thoughts down below in the comments section. If you want more Destiny lore as well as lore from universes near and far, go ahead and hit subscribe, and the bell next to subscribe to turn on those email notifications. But as per usual, know that your viewership as always has been quite enough for me, and that in the meantime, my name is Byf. Per audacia ad astra. I'll see you, Starside.